Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. Yes, today it's all about making monsters, and I've been on a long bender where we make 5e monsters, and now we've been making Shadowdark monsters, and we're going to continue to do that. I have a little bit already worked out for you, so this should probably take a fairly short period of time. I would say roughly maybe say 20 minutes at the most. I'm going to put up a poll. Feel free to take part in that poll and grab some food, some drink. Make sure you're comfortable, and we're going to get started and get into this. Okay, and I will show you the whole process. Okay, let's go. Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons specifically, and monsters. And we're going to talk about the version of Dungeons and Dragons called Shadowdark RPG. It's just a version of D&D. Shadowdark is new and old in many respects. It's got the philosophy of old OSR, and it's got some modern game mechanics and some old game mechanics as well. So it's a mixture, but it's a very clean game. And we're going to make a monster for that, a stat block, and that is the fire snake. For those of you who don't know, the fire snake is actually considered to be sort of the early larvae form of the salamander. Something that you probably used in your games before. If you're playing Dungeons and Dragons or Shadowdark, there is a salamander, but there isn't a fire snake. So we're going to make a fire snake today. And before I start that process, since I have already done some homework, so I've already got a head start, I'm going to ask you how you would go about making a fire snake for a Shadowdark game, and see what you have to say. It's always interesting to see how people would design their own stuff. I'm going to show you how to design your own Shadowdark monster. I'm going to show you how I design it myself. So hashtag, we're going to go here. How would you build a Shadowdark and build a fire snake? Fire snake for stat block. Get it right. Stat block. Sorry, people. Stat block for Shadowdark RPG. Okay. How would you build a fire snake? Have I managed to spell snake incorrectly? Yes, I have. Well done, Fred. Doing well. Fire snake, stat block for Shadowdark RPG. Okay, there we go. There it is. Right. Put in your ideas, and let's get started by showing you my Google document, which I've already started to develop. Some good news too for those of you who are wondering when I was going to get back to doing original monsters for Shadowdark. Well, AJ tells me he's now got a bit more time, AJ Pickett, and he will be drawing some monsters. So you'll probably see them on this channel where I will build them once he's drawn them. I'm not sure when that'll happen, but it's supposed to be happening soon, apparently. We'll see. We'll see. I've known AJ a long time. He's got other stuff to do, so I know that it might not necessarily happen as quickly as he would like. But in any case, this is the document that I've been working on. I've made this document in many respects available to my patrons, paid patrons, but we also have a document for Shadowdark Monsters that is free. You can join the free patronage and just sign up, and you get this chart for building your own monsters. Helps you do all the maths. Won't help you with everything else, but it will at least do the maths. We're not worrying about lore today. We're dealing with mathematics and stats in the stat block. So 19th of November in New Zealand, well, maybe the 22nd, it's probably more than that, I don't know. Here's what I got. Fire snake or fire serpent. I've written down two names because it is quite possible that fire snake will be considered IP, so we've put in fire serpent as an alternative. A snake born and living in fire or molten lava. That's basically it. So let's put here red snake, born and living in fire. These strange serpents are hot and poisonous while collecting gems for some reason. So I went back to AD&D like I do with most things when I'm making these monsters. So go back to AD&D and I have a look at AD&D, and I sort of like, I try to pull out some of the lore from that, particularly if it's missing from 5e. There's obviously nothing in the Shadowdark book, but the 5e monster book also has a little bit. It sort of connects the fire snake to the salamander, which is why it's a little bit difficult to find in this book. It is not actually under F, it is under S, because they are sort of considered in 5e definitely the larvae form, and they probably are. So our first step when making this monster stat block, since we now have what it looks like and how it operates, is what monster level. So I went back to AD&D and I had a look at what the monster level here was. Now I use the hit dice, so if it tells you what the hit dice are for a monster, that's probably the monster level you want for Shadowdark, in my opinion. So it had hit dice here 2. So I made it monster level 2. That gives me a good starting point. They are considered neutral, so that's why I gave it alignment neutral. If you want to compare that to something like 5e, well, I've said it many times before, and I'll say it again, that challenge rating in 5e is not a very good indicator. They've put it down as challenge rating 1, but you've also got to remember that there are 30 challenge ratings in 5e. And frankly, I think anything beyond 20 is complete nonsense for a salamander or any kind of monster in 5e. The stat blocks are just like stupid. But we have them. So I've gone with the AD&D hit dice being 2, that's the level, rather than challenge rating 1. Because, again, I've seen it before, challenge rating in 5e is not a good indicator. Even if you make adjustments, even if you use, I have a table for making 5e monsters for 2014, 2024 and 2025. Okay, that's also part of the free patronage, but I don't think that'll solve your problems, not for Shadowdark. Anyway, they're considered neutral evil in 5e. We're going to go with neutral. That's why it's neutral. Okay, next, armor class is descending in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, so we really have to look at, I think, 5e or another version of a snake from Shadowdark. Now, the Shadowdark snakes have an armor class of 12 for a cobra snake. There's a giant snake here, it's 12. Swarm of snakes, 12. You're seeing a pattern here. 12 seems to be a very good number. The fire snake version, I'm going to assume is probably a little bit tougher. 5e has listed the armor class for them as being 14. So I've taken that 14, transferred it over. I don't think that's going to be a big stretch, because if we look at level 2 monsters on this table here, we can go over and have a look at what is our expected armor class for a level 2 monster. Between 7 and 16. We've got 14. It's at the higher end, but that's really not a big problem. It's basically a snake that's on fire, so it's heated. So I don't think that's unreasonable to have that there. It's not at the very top end, but it's not bad. You could probably put anything between 12 and 14 here and be fine. Okay. Next, we need to do the ability scores or the modifiers, and it's because we don't usually put down the score in Shadowdark. We only put down the modifier because that's the only thing that's really useful to us, which is fine. We can't use that in AD&D because they don't really list them in the stat block, so we have to go to 5e. 3.5 won't work for us because the maths is all different, and 4e is unfortunately not going to be very helpful either, so that is probably the best place to go. So what do? I'm going to just go through and have a look, and they've got here strength 12 for a fire snake, so that's a +1. So strength +1, that's fine, let's do that. Dexterity is 14 in 5e, so that's +2. Okay, we'll put that down. Constitution 11, so that's a +0. Okay, fine. Intelligence is listed as 7, so that is a -2. Okay, got that. Wisdom is 10, which is very average, so that's +0, that's fine. And then charisma is a 8, so that is a -1. So we've got all those. Do our numbers sit within the parameters for a monster of level 2? Anything between a -4 and a +3. We've got nothing higher than a +3 and nothing lower than a -4. So we're actually fine. We don't have to worry too much about that. That's all good. How fast do they move? Well, in 5e they're listed as moving 30 feet, which is basically about near range. Near range is anything that's greater than 5 feet to 30 feet, roughly, because it's an abstraction in Shadowdark. So we could use that. That's probably the best way. If we go back to AD&D to see how fast they move, Their movement is listed as 4. 4 is actually quite slow, but it's not close. So because we kind of have to sort of take movement and jam it into the parameters that we have, which is close as 5 feet, near is anything that's more than 5 feet up to 30 feet, double near is about anything greater than 30 feet up to 60 feet, and then far is pretty much as far as you can see. Those are our abstractions. Near is probably the best we can do. They don't seem to do anything else. They don't sort of burrow or climb or anything like that, so just near is fine. And then once we've done that, we can figure out its hit points. So to do that, all monsters in Shadowdark use an 8-sided dice, a D8, okay, an 8-sided dice. So you take the average, which is 4.5. So we take our 4.5, we multiply that by the monster level, which is 2 in this case, because that's what I've selected, based on AD&D. So 4.5 multiplied by 2, we get 9. Then, of course, we have to add the Constitution modifier, and we only add the Constitution modifier once. We don't do it for multiple levels of monster level. So if there's 2 monster levels, we still only add the Constitution modifier once. Okay? You don't add Constitution modifier for every single extra level that it has. It's not 5e, for those of you who are wondering. Okay, so that means we're only adding 0 because Constitution is just 0. So that's easy. So that means that the hit points is going to be 9. And that there, in terms of a level 2 monster in Shadowdark, the average is 9. Like, that's quite expected. And it can be anywhere from an 8 to a 13. It's very rarely going to be an 8 for a level 2 monster, because minuses in Constitution are not likely. They're not something that you'll see very often, if ever. It's very, very rare. But certainly a 0 or a plus is definitely a go-to. So we've got that. That's all cool. Let's now have a look at how we want to build the rest of this monster. For those of you who are wondering, armor class being 14, since we've got a dexterity of +2, the formula from armor class in Shadowdark is 10 plus your dexterity modifier. It's got some sort of natural armor as well. So 10 and 2 is 12. But we obviously have another 2 points that must be some sort of natural armor. And they're supposed to be naturally armored. That's the intention behind them. Okay, so that's cool. Next thing, we need to determine what sort of attack it has. And for a level 2 monster, here you'll see, and this is all actually in the core rulebook for Shadowdark, between 1 and 2 attacks. I've given it 1 attack. Why have I only given it 1 attack? Primarily because I don't think it's a soldier-like monster. I don't think it's one that's sort of really good at combat. And it's also got a poison effect. So I think that's a nice balance. Just drop that down. I don't think it needs to be as tough and as deadly as that. Fire Snake, yes. But yeah, I think that's a nice balance. And then, of course, our bonus. Our bonus can be our strength modifier, which is +1, or our dexterity modifier, because it's a bite. I consider a bite to be finessable, like a dagger. There's only one weapon that is finessable in Shadowdark, and that is the dagger. But for a creature using its natural weapons, it makes sense that they are able to choose whether they use strength or dexterity. Are they basing how they attack on their strength or their dexterity? I think the Fire Snake is going to go for dexterity. So +2. Now, another thing I want to point out with Shadowdark and attack bonuses here is that your attack bonus is probably best if it is your monster level. But you could go +1 up, so we could go up to a +3, or we could go down to a +1. We could adjust it by 1 and I think it would be fine. In Shadowdark, you'll find that there are monsters in the core rulebook that range from a 0 modifier or 0 bonus to a +3 bonus with their attack bonus in Shadowdark. So there is a bit of variety. There is a range to it. I wouldn't usually use the 0 that much. I think that's a bad idea, but maybe there are some monsters that you make that are less combat based and more they have another purpose. That's why they're there. Next, how much damage does this monster do at level 2? Well, anything from a D4 to a D6. That's the recommendation. I've given it a D4, so it's at the lower end, and that is because it has a poison effect. I could go at a higher end, but as I said, I don't think this is a monster that is really an up-in-your-face, super-duper powerful monster. It is a fire snake. And then, of course, if you go back to 5e or Shadowdark, you will find there are some core things that it has that make it stand out from everything else. And that is the fact that it is immune to fire. So we have to have immunity to fire in it. That's why I put it there. There's another feature which I put highlighted, and that is hot. Touching or making melee attacks against the fire snake, DC 12 Constitution check, or take 1 damage from fire. So that is something that I added based off what I saw in AD&D and in 5e. And I probably should move this feature a little bit higher up rather than down the bottom. So we'll go cut, we'll drop it. How am I doing for time? We're doing good. Paste. And then the poison effect. Poison effect is based off another monster. I looked at all the snakes in Shadowdark. None of them have a paralyzing effect. Most of them work very differently. Like we have the cobra snake, which basically drops you to 0 hit points. It's a really high check. It's quite difficult for a level 1 monster. And the death timer is 1. So you don't get to roll a d4 and then add your constitution modifier. You just have 1 round and then you're dead. So you've got to be quick. The giant snake has constrict, so that's not really a poison effect, so we're not going to use that. The snake swarm uses constitution DC 12 check, and you go to 0 hit points, and you have that's only for 1 to 4 rounds, so you are sort of knocked out for a period of time. And I don't want to do any of that, because when I looked at how the fire snake worked in AD&D, it was a paralyzing effect. And so I used a paralyzing effect from the ghoul and the ghast for the poison effect. Even though it is poison, it needed to have a paralyzing effect. And if you have a look at how it works in 5e, they have eliminated that aspect completely. So I've brought that back because I thought that was an important aspect to them. And so that is why it is poison DC 12 constitution check or paralyzed 1d4 rounds. That is what I would say is your fire snake or fire serpent. Your larvae or the baby version of your salamander, if you want to use it that way. And that's how I would do it. This I'll put up onto Patreon at the end of the week once I'm on holiday. I am going on holiday, and you can get it in the paid Patreon section. And for those of you who want to make your own monsters for Shadowdark, this table will be available to you in the free Patreon tier, and also the 5e table is there as well, and a lot of other things that are I put out. Okay, so yes, that is how I would go about doing it. Let's go over to chat and see how you would do it, because that's sort of another question, right? Hello, Fred Huber. Fred Huber, you're not late. I know you have to build a house. It's all good. Don't worry about it. Let it burn as it constricts, because that would be interesting. I think it's... I didn't put constrict into the fire snake because I felt like that was doing too much. If it touches you, right, or you attack it and you're up close, you're gonna get hurt. It's not a lot of damage. I'm not rolling a dice to do so. I've made that amount of damage like set at 1, and part of the reason for doing that is because I'm already doing D4, and if you think about a D4, the average on that is about 2 points roughly, maybe 2.5. If I add another bit of damage, if I used a D6 instead of a D4, I would go up another step, right? That would be a D6. A D6 is usually a 3 to 3.5, the average. The red hot hugger. Yeah, I didn't build it as a hugger. I built it as a different, so I'm not putting hugger in there. But thank you for that. I know I'm not alone. I see that there was actually a couple of people in here before, which is great. I'm going to end this poll. I said about 20 minutes, and I wasn't kidding. For those of you who don't know, tomorrow I am working on backgrounds. I believe it is Sailor, Sage, and Noble. For 5e, we're going to fix up the 2024 backgrounds for those and see if we can't clean them up and make them a bit more useful to you, since I know most of you are probably customizing everything. since the backgrounds in the new version of D&D are very, they're not great. Thank you to everybody who yes, would you use a fire snake in your Shadowdark RPG game? Yes. Cool. 2 votes. Good, nice. As I said, I'll put the stuff onto Patreon. I'm going to get out of here. You can get on with your day. And I'll be back tomorrow to do more stuff with you. Backgrounds for 5e. Okay. So huge thank you to everybody who's been watching and listening. Thank you to everybody who took part in the poll. A big thank you to Fred Huber for jumping into the chat and just leaving some feedback. Don't feel bad if I've left out some ideas, because I often include things later or leave things out for various reasons. Yeah, it won't always be completely obvious. I try to stay true to the monster as it was originally envisaged, rather than anything that's modern, just because they leave out a lot of good stuff sometimes. And then huge thank you to everybody on Patreon and the paid tier who supports me, because without you I really probably wouldn't be here anymore, so I do appreciate it. For those of you who don't know what Escape from New York is, Snake Plissken, I suggest you go and check that out sometime. I even like Escape from LA, but I know some of the CGI is not great. So wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon or the night, please look after yourself, your family and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours, and hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.